with Google. Why Texas? The more I read and the more people I spoke with, however, the more I realized that in the realm of punishment, all roads lead to Texas. Why Texas? Because Texas, just as New York dominates finance and California the film industry, Texas reigns supreme in the punishment business. With 173,000 inmates and more than twice as many paid employees as Google, Texas's prison system is the largest in the United States, outstripping even California, which has an overall population 50% larger. By almost any measure, Texas stands out. The state's per capita imprisonment rate, 691 per 100,000 residents, is second only to Louisiana and three times higher than the Islamic Republic of Iran's. Uh-huh. Although Texas, so the Iran deal, you got more people locked up in Texas than Iran that Obama made the deal with. Okay. We should probably disarm Texas of its nuclear jails, huh? By almost all measures, Texas stands out. The state's per capita imprisonment rate, 691 per 100,000 residents, is second only to Louisiana and three times higher than the Islamic Republic of Iran's. Although Texas ranks 15th among states in the amount of money it spends on indigent crime criminal defense, it ranks first in prison growth, first in for-profit imprisonment, first in supermax lockdown, first in the total number of adults under criminal justice supervision, and a resounding first in executions. Damn, they top five and all that shit. They top five and it's in the top five categories. They got a they got a quintuple double out of this motherfucker. Alright. Although Texas ranks 15th among states in the amount of money it spends on indigent criminal defense, it ranks first in prison growth, first in for-profit imprisonment, first in supermax lockdown, first in the total number of adults under criminal justice supervision, and a resounding first in executions. When it comes to imprisonment, writes Joseph Hallinan, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Texas is where it's happening. Texas casts a long shadow in politics as well. Since World War II, the state has produced more presidents than any other. With the difference between with the difference among them providing a measure of the nation's post-war journey. Born in Denison, Eisenhower embodied the Cold War consensus. In the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson championed civil rights, social democracy, and preventative criminal justice, even as he shipwrecked his great society in Vietnam. LBJ's two Texas successors then led the country rightward. George H.W. Bush, who rode the specter of Willie Horton, a black rapist, to the White House and widened the war on drugs when he got there, and his son George W. Bush, who funneled more money into law enforcement and incarceration, both foreign and domestic, than any chief executive before him. Thank you. Thank you. And this source, let me see, 19. 19, chapter 1, introduction, bullet 19. You see, so I'm looking at the notes. You will be you will be surprised. That's why I thank Miss Donnelly and them, because most people don't know how to do this in this day and age. He got that from Michael Lind's Made in Texas, George W. Bush and the Southern Takeover of American Politics, 2003. And James Antier's Deep in the Heart, the Texas Tendency in American Politics, in 2004. Wow. So, yeah. So it wasn't Obama that funneled more money to law enforcement and incarceration. It was W. LBJ's two Texas successors then led the country rightward. George H.W. Bush, who wore the specter of Willie Horton to the White House and widened the war on drugs when he got there, and his son George W. Bush, who funneled more money to law enforcement and incarceration, both foreign and domestic, than any chief executive before him. By the early 21st century, Texas had come to exercise unrivaled leadership in the political arena, especially in criminal justice, where it pioneered all manner of punitive policies, from lethal injection to prison privatization. With political conservatism ascendant, Texas became the country's new bellwether state. To a large extent, Texas stands for the country as a whole. With its mythic history, multiracial population, and immense territory that stretches from the south to the southwest, Texas brings together vital threads of the American fabric. Its hardscrabble folk and wide open space symbolizes individual liberty, yet this freedom has always traveled with a wrathful twin. Torn by social divisions and wrecked by violent conflict, dramatized by the lynching of James Byrd in 1998, Texas also signifies for many Americans intolerance, bigotry, and sanguinary justice. Sanguinary means bloody. Like anytime you hear or see that word sanguine, like sanguine, like it means bloody, like sanguine. In the film Thelma and Louise, when Susan Sarandon makes Gina Davis drive thousands of miles out of the way to avoid the state, audiences are meant to understand that Texas is no place for free spirits on the run. For both its punitive singularity and historical contradictions, Texas is a fruitful site to study criminal justice over the longer durée, from one period of pervasive unfreedom to another, from the age of slavery to the age of incarceration. From its inception, the state has served as a contentious testing ground for rival styles of penal discipline. Corporal punishment versus Christian charity, exploitative field labor versus penitentiary-based confinement, retribution versus rehabilitation. A populist strain in Texas politics has inspired the most spirited penal reform movements in the South. From agrarian radicals who railed against forced labor to civil rights activists who assailed prison segregation. But an even stronger tradition of racial demagoguery and penny-pinching conservatism, combined with the intransigence of the state's prison guard establishment, has managed to beat back each of these challenges. In Texas, justice, as in politics, left has always battled right, but the right has always won. It was one of the cliches that we were dragging our state, kicking and screaming, into the 20th century, recalls Ronnie Duggar, the founding editor of the Texas Observer, the state's liberal standard bearer. But lo and behold, Texas has dragged the United States back into the 19th century. It's my baby right here, y'all. May she rest in peace. Geneva, baby girl. You probably ain't gonna know who Aaliyah is. Most people don't in this day and age. Most young kids don't. But she was a songstress who passed too soon, died in a plane crash. Hey, I don't know if your mom, if your mom showed you, right? She probably did, so you probably seen it. But she gonna tell you. So it wasn't a 4-page letter, so it was a 1-pager. But the product of this mismatched historical struggle is a uniquely harsh model of criminal justice, a regime of state-sanctioned punishment based on roughshod legal proceedings, racial subjugation, corporal punishment, and unpaid field labor that has persevered into the 21st century. Texas's plantations are probably the best example of slavery remaining in the country, reported a national corrections expert in 1978. 20 years later, when I first started visiting southern prisons, I reached the same conclusion. Nowhere else in turn of the millennium America could one witness gangs of African American men filling cotton sacks under the watchful eyes of armed whites on horsebacks. Plantation prisons at Sugarland, Huntsville, and elsewhere have preserved the lifeways of slavery in carceral amber. They're pretty much saying slavery is still going on in chain gangs in Texas today. You know what I mean? Prison is like the worst form of punishment ever, yo. It's crazy. For most of American history, Texas's implacable punishment traditions relegated it to the margins of penology, a field devoted in theory if not practice to the moral regeneration of criminals. In the late civil rights era, however, as rehabilitation programs faltered, crime rates soared, and a new breed of politicians discovered that crime, especially black crime, galvanized white voters. Lone, Texas's Lone Star became a guiding light. State after state began copying elements of what prison experts call the Texas control model, while politicians looked with new fondness on the state's severe sentencing statuses. Once dismissed as a disgrace of Christian civilization, Texas became the template for a more fearful and vengeful society. Nationwide, tough new crime policies, far more than rising crime rates, fueled prodigious prison growth. Between 1965 and 2002, the United States prison population swelled by 600%. In Texas, by 1,200%. Over the same period, wow. Over the same period, sentences grew longer and early releases rarer. Prison education and counseling programs withered, while supermaxes and death rows sprang up from coast to coast. We were building prisons so fast we couldn't find wardens to run them. A criminal justice professor at Sam Houston State University told me. It was like mobilizing for World War. By the end of the century, the United States had embarked on an unprecedented experiment in mass incarceration, one that not only is changing the country's approach to crime and punishment, but is reworking the fabric of American society. This book tells the story of this punitive revolution with Texas at its epicenter, examining the interplay of race, crime, and politics over almost 2 centuries. It explains how a proud frontier republic forged in democratic revolts came to build one of the roughest penal regimes in American history. It shows how a uniquely callous and radicalized and profit-driven style of punishment that developed on slavery's frontier became a model for the nation in the post-civil rights era. By analyzing the life and times of America's harshest, largest penal system, Texas Stuff proposes fresh ways of thinking about imprisonment and society. First, he argues that the history of punishment in the United States is more of a Southern story than has generally been realized. By the numbers, the South has long been the dominant player in criminal justice. Open almost any book on the subject, however, and the states of the former Confederacy are scarcely mentioned, except perhaps to underline their particularity. In the historiography of imprisonment scholars, in the historiography of imprisonment scholars have hewed to her remarkably unitary storyline, with the first Northeast penitentiaries foreboding public institutions that were meant to restore wayward citizens to virtue through penitent solitude, imperfectly evolving into modern correctional bureaucracies, complete with psychological counseling and parole. Although historians vary widely in their approaches and viewpoints, they have overwhelmingly replicated narratives of halting progress in pursuit of the rehabilitative ideal. Until recently, this progressive, regionally restrictive version of history possessed a certain logic. Because prison managers, whatever their shortcomings, steadfastly claimed reformation as their goal, and because most rehabilitative innovations originated in the North, it seemed only logical for historians to thus focus their efforts. Alas, now that the country's prison establishment has largely abandoned the cause of moral regeneration, it is easier for us to detect southern roots. Over the last few decades, prisons have not become more humane, less racially divisive, less authoritarian, or even more supple in the exercise of power as the dominant literature had led us to expect. Rather, American lockups have become harsher, more regimented, more racially divisive, more markedly less rehabilitative. They no longer aim to repair and redeem, but to warehouse, avenge, and permanently differentiate convicted criminals from law abiding citizens. One of my biggest one of my biggest concerns right now for the future of Black America, I've especially in my time in Los Angeles, it's about to be 2 years. Especially in my time in Los Angeles, I have lived among, I have met with, I have talked with, I have interacted with, I have ran into, I have rode the bus with, rode the train with, waited the bus stop with, ran into people at the store, like with plenty brothers who have done time and are trying to adjust back, get back into the flow of society, into the fabric of society. That is It's a lot of anger, rightly so. I'm not taking nothing away from that. There's this part in New York, the Fortune Society. Yo, the people over there, the few months I spent going there because of a program, because of some charge I had back in Maryland that was keeping me from getting jobs that I wanted in New York type shit. Long story short though, Fortune Society, yo, if it wasn't for the tutelage I had there, especially with like interview prep and like resume, really working on your resume and answering questions on a job application, you know, I mean, things like that, life would have been really tougher. But yeah, Fortune Society in New York. Yeah, I know who I'm talking about. I wish they had a Fortune Society in every city ran the same way that they ran, especially in LA, yo. Y'all need to branch out to LA. Y'all ex-cons in LA need y'all help. I ain't even gonna lie. I'm just saying. I haven't seen an organization like y'all's yet, but still, long story short though, I I was just voicing concern about something that I see as a major hindrance if if something isn't done to work as a community with these brothers that are coming out. You know what I mean? There's a lot of anger and rightly so. And that anger needs to be focused in other ways that doesn't lead to that doesn't become detrimental to the members of a society that we've left and joining back, you know what I mean? Like, eh, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but my mind is trying to say something. They, they no longer aim to repair and redeem, but to warehouse, avenge, and permanently differentiate convicted criminals from law abiding citizens. Today's prisons operate less in the tradition of what the founding penologists Enoch Wines called the reformatory idea than in a retributive mode that had long been practiced and promoted in the South. To piece together a more complete genealogy of the modern prison, therefore, this book redirects the spotlight from the North, the birthplace of rehabilitative penology, to the South, the fountainhead of subjugationist discipline. In addition to tracing the evolution of social welfare and the gospel of redemption, it examines the development of labor control, racial division, and corporal debasement. The result is that two ancestral lines come into view, one reformatory, one retributive, one integrative, one exclusionary, one conceived in northern churches and the other on southern work farms. Over the course of American history, these rival traditions have contended for influence, and in the closing decades of the 20th century, exclusion and revenge gained the upper hand. In short, this book posits that most historians have studied only half of the family tree. American prisons trace their lineage not back to Pennsylvania penitentiaries, but to Texas slave plantations. If you haven't seen 13th by now, I know I asked you to stop and go watch it a long time ago. If you haven't seen it by now, if you've seen it, we here. We here. Welcome to my blackness. Yeah, now we here. If you've seen 13th by now and you've stuck with me up to this point, we here. This historical reorientation leads to the book's second principal argument. The evolution of the prison has had surprisingly little to do with crime and a great deal to do with America's troubled history of racial conflict and social stratification. I'm on my Will Smith Fresh Prince. It's like, now let me stop. This historical reorientation leads to the book's second principal argument. The evolution of the prison has had surprisingly little to do with crime and a great deal to do with America's troubled history of racial conflict and social stratification. Decoupling punishment from crime defies conventional wisdom. Most citizens like to think that prisons keep predatory villains off the street, and to a certain degree they do. Yet an examination of the historical record, as well as present-day statistics, reveal that state punishment has consistently served purposes beyond crime control. Indeed, the strong arm of the law has been regularly deployed not only to protect public safety, but to preserve privilege, bolster political fortunes, and most of all, to discipline those on the social margins, especially African Americans. Fuck you, white supremacy. I wasn't saying white America, I was saying white supremacy. Hey man, I'm African. White supremacy affected me first before I even came to America. Trust me, I'm African. Bill Clinton as an American president during the 90s. The United States was involved. Okay, there was like $132 billion worth of arms stolen after the wall came down, because there was an impending war that these two great nations were preparing for that never took place, and all these weapons were sitting down here with nothing to be done with it. 11 major conflicts involving 32 countries in less than a decade in the 90s in Africa. Now, there are 54 countries in Africa, right? There are 54 individual countries in Africa. 32 of them in the 90s. 32 of them were involved in 11 major conflicts with weapons that were not made by no one in Africa, no one black in the West. Some black folks in some southern towns working black factories, you know what I mean? But the overall show is white people and their families, you know what I mean? Real talk. But ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. I have written that somewhere. I didn't know why I had written it, what context, in which context I have written it, but it's okay. It says ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. And if you're wondering where I got that, it's 11 major conflicts in 32 countries in less than a decade. That was from that Nicolas Cage movie, Lord of War. That's an awesome ass movie, yo. It's an awesome ass movie. It was one of those big ones, like a straight to DVD movie or something, but it was nice. It got Bridget Moynihan in it. What's her name? The girl, the lady that played Erin Reagan on Blue Bloods with Danny Wahlberg, the non-racist Wahlberg brother. Because the other ones, they're shit questionable. The notion that the law serves the powerful is probably as old as the law itself. A character in Plato's Republic asserted, in every case the laws are made by the ruling party in its own interest. Yet in the United States, where the highest court bears the inscription equal justice under the law, this basic critique is too often ignored. We tend to see justice even where dominion resides. The history of Texas brings dominion into sharp focus. Although the Lone Star State was founded on the lofty principles of liberty and independence, its 1936 Its 1836 Constitution codified an inviolable hierarchy of rights, barring all Africans, the descendants of Africans and Indians from citizenship. And I wrote on the margins here while I was reading this book. I wrote, can't see, I wrote on the margins here, and my handwriting is like chicken scratch. When you see that letter that I left for your mom that day, that I'm talking about, you're gonna see what I'm talking about. I wrote Virginia Code Law of 1863 or 1836. Or was it 1866? Let me see if I can find that. That's an awesome read. Virginia Code Law. Let me see what's up with this. Trying to find this damn thing. Trying to find this damn thing. The Virginia Vagrancy Law. This is from history.org, right? This is from history.org. The growth of the black populations. It says slavery and law in Virginia. 1625-23. Black folks in Virginia. I mean, now that makes sense. Alright, it says 1625, right? This is from history.com. History.org, Colonial Williamsburg, slavery and the law in Virginia, right? It was showing the growth and population of in Virginia, and this is a thing of the Jamestown settlements of Virginia. It was the first permanent English settlements of the Americas. It was established in 1607. And then all that good shit. The Mayflower Company. Okay. Okay. The Virginia Company bought 8 Polish and German colonies in 1608 in the second supply, some of whom built a small glass factory. Although the Germans and a few others soon defected to the Powhatans with weapons and supplies from the settlement. The second supply also brought the first 2 European women to the settlement. In 1619, the first documented Africans came to Jamestown. About 50 men, women, and children aboard a Portuguese slave ship that had been captured in the West Indies and brought to the Jamestown region. They most likely worked in the tobacco fields as indentured servants, but they became slaves as time went on. The modern conception of slavery in the United States was formalized in 1640, the John Porch hearing, and was fully entrenched in Virginia by 1660. Okay. This took me to the Royal African company supplying slaves to Jamestown? This is from nps.gov, the National Park Service's historic Jamestown, spelled with an E, part of Colonial National Historic Park, Virginia. The start of English slave trade. As early as 1618, 1718, that's 100 years. 1818, that's 200 years. Are you with me? 1918, that's 300 years. 2018, that's 400 years. I told ya, it's about to be 400 years. Well, it's 400 years now. Just providing the information, man. Just providing the information. That shit ain't nothing new. 400 years ain't nothing, yo. The America of today wasn't thought of what it is today 400 years ago. They had just been coming here too. They had just got here too. All these white folks that want to always talk about, oh, this is our land, this and that. They had just started coming here too. It was Indians here, so, but it was South Americans that had flowed through. You know, I mean, that all that good shit. The start of English slave trade. As early as 1618, King James I had granted a permit to a company that wanted to trade for gold and precious woods in Africa. Other groups also received rights to trade in Africa, but never dealt with slaves in any major way. English involvement in the slave trade would intensify after 1663, when a new patent was issued to the Company of Royal Adventurers. Buying slaves was an adventure, huh? Kanye's Choice. That's the name of the adventure. His choice. England had realized the money to be made trading slaves to the West Indies and Virginia. By 1668, over a quarter of the new company's profits was derived from the slave trade. Africans in Virginia's early years. The first documented arrival of Africans to Virginia was in 1619. 1719, that's 100 years. 1819, that's 200 years. Are you with me? 1919, that's 300 years. Next year, 2019, will be 400 years. So, since it's not next year yet, it's almost, but since it's not next year, for the sake of keeping it right in your head, in your mind, let's go ahead and say 399 years. You know what I mean? Let's be arithmetically accurate. Africans in Virginia's early years. The first documented arrival of Africans to Virginia was in 1619, when an English warship, White Lion, fuck that. I hadn't known that fact, but that was all. When an English warship, White Lion, arrived at Point Comfort in present-day Hampton, the African captives had been forcibly removed from a Portuguese slave ship subsequent to being attacked by the White Lion and another English warship, Treasurer, while sailing in the Bay of Campeche. The White Lion's English captain, John Job, carried letters of marque from the Dutch Prince Maurice, making it legal for his ship to sail as a privateer and attack any Spanish or Portuguese ships he encountered. The 20 and odd Africans on the White Lion was traded to colony officials for food. These Africans were much needed workers to cultivate tobacco, the new cash crop of Virginia. The institution of slavery slowly crept into Virginia legislation. By 1660, slavery as we think of it today was established in Virginia. Tobacco was extremely labor intensive, and more workers were needed. The sale of Africans to Virginia planters promised to be a profitable endeavor. The company's beginning. At first, trading directly with other European countries was common in Virginia, but the Navigation Act of 1660 brought such relations to a close. Only English-owned ships could enter colonial ports. The Crown had realized the wealth that could be achieved through trade and wanted that wealth for England. Once the Navigation Act was passed, Virginia planters were forced to rely on the mother country to supply them with their labor force. To address this dearth, the Royal African Company was formed in 1672. Agents in Jamestown. Merchants in London associated with the residents of Jamestown were also heavily involved in the slave trade. John Jeffreys, one of those merchants, owned part of a row house in Newtown, and historians speculate that slaves were sold in front of the building on a wharf. The Royal African Company also had agents in Virginia to whom slaves were delivered. Those agents received a 7% commission on sales. Most of those agents got like millions of descendants out here right now. All that white wealth that was created on the backs of slaves, 7% commission on sales. That should be the reparations percentage. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, white supremacy. These agents received a 7% commission on sales. John Page, Colonel Nathaniel Bacon, William Sherwood were all prominent Virginians who served as factors, agents, and representatives for the company. The company's decline. Many factors contributed to the loss of the Royal African Company's monopoly in 1689. First and foremost, the company was not achieving a profit. As a matter of fact, it resorted to borrowing money to pay dividends. Then there were the complaints from the planters. The demand for slaves was always too high for the company alone to supply, and the planters urged that the monopoly be abolished so that more slaves could be imported. Finally, the company, which was always heavily patronized by the Stuart monarchs, fell out of favor when John II was deposed and William and Mary came to the throne. Sources consulted were Elizabeth Downey, Documents Illustrative of the History of the Slave Trade to America, Volume 1, Carnegie Institution, Washington, D.C., Susan Myra Kingsbury, The Records of the Virginia Company of London, Government Printing Office, 1906, Washington, D.C., Martha A. McCarthy, A Study of the Africans and African Americans on Jamestown Island and at Green Spring, 1619 to 1803. Williamsburg, Virginia National Park Service and Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, 2013. This reference is available online through this link. That was a good read. That was a good read. So, the growth of the black population in Virginia, 1625-23, 1648, or 25 to 48, 30, oh, what's that, 23 years? Wow, in 23 years, yeah, 300. Wow. In another 23 years, yeah, 2,000. In 9 years, you had 1,000 more, so 3,000. Then in 20 years, it went from 3,000. Wow. So now the Virginia law went into effect in 1660. Then by 1775, it was 210,000 slaves in America. This says black population, but I'm not saying black population. Like that. Yeah, it is black population, but it's slave laws passed in Virginia, 1640 to 1660. The critical period. Custom to law when status changed to servant for life. 1639-40. The General Assembly of Virginia specifically excludes blacks from the requirement of possessing arms. 1642. Black women are deemed tithable, taxable, creating a distinction between African and English women. 1642. Damn. That shit is still there. 1662. Blacks face the possibility of life servitude. The General Assembly of Virginia decides that any child born to an enslaved woman will also be a slave. 1660 to 1680. Slave laws further restrict freedom of blacks and legalize different treatments for blacks and whites. 1667. Virginia lawmakers say baptism does not bring freedom to blacks. The statute is passed because some slaves used their status as a Christian in the 1640s and 1650s to argue for their freedom or for freedom for a child. Legislators also encouraged slave owners to Christianize their enslaved men, women, and children. 1668. Free black women, like enslaved females over the age of 16, were deemed taxable. The Virginia General Assembly says freedom does not exempt black women from taxation. 1669, a year later. An act about the casual killing of slaves said that if a slave dies while resisting his master, the act will not be perceived to have occurred with prepense malice. 1670. Free blacks and Native Americans who had been baptized are forbidden to buy Christian servants. 1672. It became legal to wound or kill an enslaved person who resists arrest. Legislators also deemed that the owner of any slave killed as he resisted arrest will receive financial compensation for the loss of an enslaved laborer. Wow. Oh man. Wow. I hate to put it this way, but I know if you're black in America and you got a job and you go about the hustle bustle of your daily job, you see the looks on certain Caucasians' faces that you see some of these ancient archaic backwards thinking beliefs in their faces and in their eyes. They don't mean no harm, but you can see that they have a familiar environmental generational belief and way of thinking that they cannot escape it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. Like I say, I listen more with my eyes than with my ears. I'm already gonna listen with my ears. I'm in tune already. I'm naturally gonna listen with my ears. I don't have to make too much of an effort to listen to my ears. My ears deceive me sometimes, so I'm not tripping. But if my ears deceive me and I'm wrong, and then I'm perceiving something different with my eyes, I'm just saying I'm gonna call you out on it. You know what I mean? That's how I know Trump is a racist and he's a rapist, because of the way, the 80% that I pay attention to what he's saying and how he says it. He make me feel like that brother right there. It becomes legal to wound or kill an enslaved person who resists arrest. Legislatures also deemed that the owner of any slave killed as he resisted arrest will receive financial compensation for the loss of an enslaved laborer. Legislatures also offer a reward to Indians who captured escaped slaves and returned them to the justice of the peace. See? Try to tell you, man. Them damn crackers, them damn crackers know how to divide and conquer. 1680 to 1705. Slave laws reflect racism and deliberate separation of blacks and whites. Color becomes the determining factor. Conscious efforts to rigidly police slave conduct. 1680. Virginia's General Assembly restricts the ability of slaves to meet at gatherings, including funerals. It became legal for a white person or person to kill an escaped slave who resists capture. Slaves are also forbidden to arm them. You know what? I'm not gonna do all that, but nah, that's just. I'm just making myself mad as I'm reading it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, now you feel where I'm coming from with it. You know what I mean? If you, 1691, okay, all that. 1605, 1705. But if you want to read the whole thing yourself, though, it is at history.org, and it is the slavery and the law in Virginia. You know what I mean? It is an awesome read. Just know that 400 years ago, the first few people of African descent who eventually were joined by hundreds of millions and millions of other people afterwards. 1775. In 150 years, it went from 23 slaves to 210,000 slaves. In the first 150 of that 400 years that it's been so far, it went from that much to that much. And that much right there has led 400 minus 150 is what, 250? So the 250 years since this nation has been a republic, we have gone from that 210,000 to 50 million strong, with a buying power of about $1.7 trillion. Some nations haven't seen that, and I mean European nations, westernized nations, don't have that much as their GDP. You know what I mean? But our buying power is not going to us. One of the ways I propose that buying power comes to us is by having the 700 men or so who are multi-millionaires and more in the NFL just boycott the rest of the season, send a shock to the system, just pull a Le'Veon Bell collectively, like just do it collectively. The NFL does not have backup players, does not have 700 backup players for them to put an all-white. Even if they did, they would not put an all-white product on their field. They will not put 32 teams of 53 men apiece that's all white on their field if there is a major racial boycott like that. Yes, it will be a major racial boycott. I'm not trying to hide behind it. I don't want you to hide behind it. What the fuck you think Trump was? 62 million of them motherfuckers gung-ho together and voted this motherfucker in. 50 million of us can come together and do something together. I'm just saying. There's 192 million Caucasians in America. 192. Only 62 million voted for this asshole. So the numbers are on our side. You know what I mean? If we just do our part. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they're about 110, 115, 105 or so million good-hearted white Americans who know that this nation needs to go in a direction that it was already going, but has been swayed, has been turned leftward, which is not, has been turned rightward, which is not. So, you know what I mean? But, you know, now what do I know, right? But still, a long story short though, there's great power in numbers, but we gotta know that we have to do it on an individual, collective level. You know what I mean? I'm not asking you to do something this year and then forget to do next year and then forget to do next year. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. Just so reading opens up your mind, and voting changes things around you that affect your life without you noticing it. Unless you go make the decision and you see the results of it, and when you've read what that decision will be when you go vote for that candidate that you want to vote for, or when you go vote for that proposition that you want to vote for. You know what I mean? Speaking of voting, right? I have been seeing ads and commercials and whatnot uh, about Proposition 8, Proposition 10. Uh, I am not a voter, but by law, they have to send these to every address in the state. I think they do. You know, this is the California General Election Guide. It says Tuesday, November 6, 2018, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on election day. Polls are usually open well past 8 p.m. So, no. Official Voter Information Guide. I, Alex Padilla, Secretary of State, Certificate of Correctness. I, Alex Padilla, Secretary of State of the State of California, do hereby certify that the measures included herein will be submitted to the electors of the State of California at the general election to be held throughout the state on November 6, 2018, that this guide will have correctly prepared in accordance with the law. Witness my hand at the Great Seal of the State of the State in Sacramento, California, this 13th day of August, 2018. Okay. Now they got the table of contents has the 12 propositions on the ballot this November, and I so wish SB 27 would have made it on this ballot. Speaking of SB 27. Speaking of SB 27. Speaking of SB 27. Speaking of SB 27, right? Speaking of House Bill 27. Where is it at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you hiding at? Where you hiding at? So I know I got you here somewhere. Look at me calling this thing SB 27. SB 827. Okay. This was amended in the Senate, in the California Senate on March the 1st of 2018. It is Senate Bill number 827, introduced by Scott Weiner. The principal co-author is Senator Skinner. Principal co-author is Assemblymember Ting. Co-author Senator Hueso. January 3rd, 2018. An act to add Chapter 4.3 commencing with Section to Division 1 of Title 7 of the Government Code related to land use. Legislative Council's Digest. SB 827 as amended. Weiner Planning and Zoning Transit-Rich Housing Bonus. The planning and zoning law requires when an applicant proposes a housing development within the jurisdiction of a local government that the city, county, or city and county provides the developer with a density bonus and other incentives or concessions for the production of low-income housing units or for the donation of land within the development if the developer, among other things, agreed to construct a specified percentage of units for very low or moderate income households of qualifying residents. The bill will require a local government to, if requested, grant a development proponents to a transit-rich housing project, a transit-rich housing bonus if their development meets specified planning standards, including complying with demolition permit requirements, local inclusionary housing ordinance requirements, preparing a relocation benefits and assistance plan, any locally adopted objective zoning standards and any locally adaptive minimum unit mix requirement. The bill would define a transit-rich housing project as a residential development project that parcels of which are all within 1.5 mile radius of a major transit stop or a quarter-mile radius of a stop on a high-quality transit corridor. The bill will exempt an eligible applicant who receives a transit-rich housing bonus from various requirements, including maximum control on residential density, maximum control on floor area ratio that are lower than the specified amount, minimum automobile parking requirement, maximum height limitations, and zoning or design controls that have effect of limiting additions into existing structures or lots that comply with those maximum floor area ratios and height limitations. The bill will require an eligible applicant who receives a transit-rich housing bonus to provide benefits to eligible displaced persons who are displaced by the development, including requiring the applicants to offer a right to remain guaranteed to those tenants and to make payments to eligible displaced persons for moving and related expenses as well as for relocation benefits. The bill will also require an eligible applicant to submit a relocation benefit and assistance plan for approval to the applicable local government to that effect, and to provide specified information and assistance to eligible displaced persons. The bill will declare that